everyone. This is the 12th episode of Grow This, Grow That podcast devoted to engineering management. And today we have the topic of engineering leadership. I have three wonderful engineering leaders who will be discussing today. It's André, and David, who will introduce themselves. And guys, please.
My name is Andrey. I am a CTO and co-founder of Scentbird, and Scentbird is a subscription service for perfumes and colognes. Been in engineering for the last 13 years, and only been engineer manager in the Scentbird.
Thank you, André. André, could you please?
Hi, thank you, Shankar, for having me. I'm the other André here on the call. I'm a front-end engineering manager at GitLab. So for those who don't know, GitLab is a DevOps platform. We produce a product that you can use to manage your products and how they're digitally developed. I started as an engineer. Started as a senior engineer at GitLab in 2018, and then moved over to engineering manager a little bit shortly after that. And I currently manage a team of 6 people around the world. And happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And Dave, please.
My name is David Stanley. I'm a group engineering manager at Webflow. Webflow is a no-code platform to build and publish and host websites for people. I've been in engineering management since about 2012. And right now, I head up the infrastructure pillar as well as the team success pillar at Webflow.
Thank you all, guys. Okay, let's start with the first question, sort of an opening. How to be a leader for an engineering team? What's the general purpose of engineering leadership?
I once heard that a good manager is a person who help others to become their best at work. And I prefer to follow this principle. And another thing that I would, as personally like in managers, is when you don't interfere with others people work, and you usually let people work, don't disturb them. Like that's for me especially important in engineering, because we know through for other professions, but in engineering we all know how engineers don't want to be disturbed, and that's why the good engineering manager is a person who knows when to come, when to ask, and what to ask.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think the two things I try to keep in mind are the primary purpose of my job is to provide context on what's important, whether it's because of trade-offs, because of goals, whatnot, provide context, and then get things out of people's way. I kind of start with the assumption that engineers want to build good things and ship code that is productive and valuable and solve interesting problems. So if I can tell them this is why this problem is important and interesting, and this is how we can ship good code that adds value, then that context is very helpful. And then it's my job to make sure they have the tools they need, the space they need, the answers they need to do that and to do that well.
Absolutely, David. I have to agree with everything you just mentioned. I would add that one of the things we've talked a lot about at GitLab is the servant leadership, where our success equates to the success of our direct reports. And that just basically means no ego. The people are not their work, that we have to keep humble and kind of like make sure that they have everything they need to succeed. And when I became a manager, Tim Zalman at GitLab told me something that I will never forget about the multiplication of impact, in the way that you should try to have the largest impact through your team, but not try to drive it yourself. Otherwise, we can only go so far writing code. But if you do create a healthy environment of collaboration around the team, then you'll have a much wider impact in the end goal. So that's something that I always keep true to close to my heart, and as I'm doing my job. But which is pretty much everything you just mentioned as well.
Thank you, guys, everyone. You've all mentioned the thing, like the purpose. Just to sum up what you shared before we go, you said that I love what actually in the end André said about the servant leadership, that you are helping others, and the one that André told at the start, that you're helping others be best version of themselves, doesn't interfere with the others, and actually trying to describe the engineers why tasks are important and understand how they bring value, as Dave said. What exact leadership skills and what are the most important skills in your job that help you do just that? How are you providing context? How are you just putting and explaining value that a developer need, and what skills are required to be the servant leader and doesn't interfere with ours while you are building something, because we all working with the other people, it's stressful, and what actually helps you be the best versions of leaders of yourself.
The most important skill is empathy, because you have to adapt to each of your direct reports. Not everyone's different. And the strategies you use for one person might not work on another person. And I had a case where one of my direct reports was struggling with, throughput and productivity. And instead of me coming into that conversation as like, you're failing at this, I was like, let's try to figure out what's happening here. And in the end of that conversation, we figured out that it was the way that the work was being prepared that didn't fit their mental model and the way they were more productive. And then we had a very interesting conversation about, all right, so then what do you need me to prepare? What do you need me to change so that you can be more productive? And in that sense, if I had stepped into that conversation as this is wrong, you need to do better, we wouldn't have the same result. And the same thing about introverts and extroverts, adapting to that. If you don't have empathy, it's going to be very hard to connect to the engineers on your team.
Yeah, I think empathy is one of those things that I kind of go back to even before that is a kind of a stance of humility and sincerity. Right. I'm not going to try and act like I'm perfect or I was the best engineer. I mean, plenty of people you can talk to. Maybe I was above average, but I certainly had places where I was not good. But leading the conversation from that as it's okay that we're failing. It's okay that we have questions, and it's okay that we can't solve it all. Leading from that point of view, or entering a conversation from that point of view, I think is really the important part, because that for me has always enabled me to connect with people and really get to the root cause of things quicker. And when I say something or address performance or something like that, it comes from a collaborative, let's get better point of view, kind of, Andre, like you said, a coaching mentality versus a judging, passing judgment sort of thing. I think empathy is just as important as that. But if people don't trust you, doesn't matter how much empathy you have. If people don't believe that you're authentic and understand because you've been there, and maybe that is the definition of empathy, right? But that's where I come from, is that stance of you should hear the things I've screwed up before. Now let's talk about how we all win and how we all get better.
Well, like if I may add up to this, I will slightly generalize this, and there is one thing that is beyond empathy, it is emotional intelligence, which includes a couple of other things, including soft skills, including self-awareness, including ability to control your own emotions and express them in the correct way. I think, luckily enough, it becomes more and more popular, this concept, and people start learning about their feeling, others' feeling, and it all helps us, not just as engineering manager, but as human being itself. But I would add that for me, for example, being able to, share what other people feel, but also express my own feelings, again, not in a judgment way, but like saying, hey guys, like I'm feeling this right now, and this is why, so please also understand me. Like when you have this kind of honest conversation between different parties, no matter I mentioned up or I mentioned down, that also helps.
Thanks, Andrey, Dave, and Andrea. That's one. It comes from the. I actually would sum up with the Dave's phrase that if people don't trust you, it doesn't matter how much empathy you have. So two things that are, and two things important, like building the empathy and adapting to others, and making sure that you are the same person and people trust in you. So this empathy has a place. And the last thing that Andrey mentioned, considering the self-awareness, controlling the emotions, because that is very important, because you need to coach and give back something to the person and actually build some decision on that. So you just need to be so to say, more conscious in that way. But what comes from this is all you mentioned, that you need to build trust and build empathy, but the idea as the role of the manager, besides collaborating with the tech team and the needs of developers, is having some business needs. You need to ship product, and product owners come to you, and you need to show some metrics and KPI. How Litter finds this balance between business and developers' needs? How to apply this ideas of empathy, sincerity, servant leadership in that matter?
I think you're onto something there. It's not enough just to be a nice warm blanket for people and help them along. There is a directed purpose to where we're going. I think the way for me that I've always done that is let people know that we're trying to balance three things that are sometimes competing, so that we can get to what I think the ultimate motivation for a lot of people is. They want to build stuff and write code and ship things that matter. And so when I go into conversations with product or with design or execs or with the rest of the engineering team, we talk about trade-offs of what are we going to do that's going to help acquisition? What are we going to do that's going to help churn? And what are we going to do that's going to help kind of the sustainability things? We all want to work on a product that users love. I want to build on a product that engineers love to build. And so in order to get to that, in order to get that happy spot where it's easy to build and see results, you have to talk about that balance, I think, a lot. And engineers have to know that you have that balance in mind, that you're going to guard it. So when you come and say, hey, we can't work on this tech debt thing right now because we have to fix this feature, or hey, let's fix this bug and do this thing so that we can build that feature later. I think if they know that's where your values are grounded and you're looking for that balance, I think it's easier to get people to support you. And it's easier to kind of get everybody pulling the same direction. Yeah, I think that's easier to get people to see that, hey, this does matter and this is going to have an impact.
Reflect on what David just said. I think like if there is one question that I should ask as a manager, it's a question why. Because like if you know why things are happening, why people come with you to a certain request, why people do something, why they don't do something, then you are in a perfect position. Because like when product comes to say we need to do this, you ask why, and then you can able to tell it to a team. You ask the business, hey, why we are changing our goals all of a sudden? Because while 3 months ago you said this is set in stone. Why all of a sudden we have to postpone legacy? Because when people don't like engineers, yes, we love to build things, but we also need to, in order to do it right, we need to know why we are doing this. And in many cases, no matter what we do, fixing bugs or working on some incredible feature or dealing with legacy code, it still could be interesting. Again, if you know why we're doing this, what's the purpose of this? Because I bet everyone here read this book called Drive, What Really Motivates Us. There should be purpose. With the question why, you can always get to this purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I think a lot about is the spheres of visibility of the layers of leadership, right? So I, as an engineering manager, have a certain visibility towards product topics and discussions that my engineers don't want to have, right? They're focused on their work, they're in their flow, they don't want to be interrupted by meetings. And I have a duty to kind of translate what I see to them as my senior manager has for me, all the way up to the CTO. And it's not unusual to have a conversation about some changes that happen in the company, and they're questioning, like, why is this happening? And I do my best to kind of translate that to them in a way that they can understand the why that Andrei was talking just now. So that thing about the handoff of visibility, and there's also the trust that has been brought up here before, where I don't have visibility about everything that the CTO has, for example. So that if there is trust there, there's the unknown unknowns quote from Donald Rumsfeld back in the day, that I don't know what I don't know. So there's probably, I either trust them or I don't trust them. And if there is trust, then that translation of visibility, it's much easier to go through. And again, that's one of our duties, is to make them more productive. If they don't want to be interrupted by meetings, we have to summarize everything that is worthwhile for them and leave out the rest. prepare the stories, prepare the issues so that they can be picked up by engineers, but then translate to them what they need to know as time goes on.
Thanks, guys, for sharing this. We as we speak during the conversation, we talk about trust a lot, building this culture of trust. But I want to also talk on the so to say, like more the bad side of how could the engineering managers undermine trust, and what actually undermines trust within a team from the engineering standpoint and from the developers. So for example, you as engineering manager, what actually undermines your trust with the other developer, for example? What are some red flags that you see? And what, in your opinion, you think, what undermines trust in the eyes of developers from your side, what you've actually experienced on your self-experience?
So one of the things that I feel like undermine relationships is if you hide things, if you're not honest. So if there's anything in your communication that is not fully transparent, then it kind of starts to feel uneasy. And with our relationship with engineers and other people, sometimes we're colleagues, we have relationships, so we don't want to be harsh. We don't want to be creating a conflict or something. So we kind of water down our message, and you end up not saying what you want to say. So I think being responsible with how you deliver your message, even if it's harsh, even if it's negative, you just have to be responsible in how you deliver that, no matter what it takes, so that the person understands we're all rowing on the same direction. So let's all try to find a way to get to the same point, but not hide things. So I think what undermines, I think, relationships is when you start to hide things and you don't tell it the whole story, especially the meaningful parts that affect their work. That to me is one of the things I try to look out for, is when I'm talking on a specific serious topic and it's a negative feedback session, one-to-one. So, positive feedback in public, negative feedback in private. Make sure that I'm coming through clearly, so that I'm not just being too friendly or being too watering down of the messaging. That could blow up in my face back later in the day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Holding information from people, sometimes you have to, sometimes you can't let everything. You can't let all the thought process be out there, but holding the material pertinent information that keeps somebody from doing their job well is a big one. But there's also things like keeping credit for things, not publicly, vocally, quickly passing that credit on to your team, not being an advocate for the right thing. If your team sees you standing up for them, I hate using the word taking a stand, that sort of thing. But if the team sees you just kind of rolling over on things, saying, yeah, well, we'll do it, sure, no problem, knowing it's going to be a problem for the team, that kind of, I think, damages a little credibility. Or is this person really in our corner and an advocate for us? Shying away from tough conversations, like you said, Andre, is a huge one. You got to be willing to give that tough criticism up front, but at the same time, you have to be open to that criticism coming back. If they think it's just a one-way, we're talking about people in third person. We're all engineers, I think, here at heart. You got to be open to criticism and open to improvement and demonstrate the behavior you want. And I think that helps build trust as well.
And one thing that is connected to be open for the criticism is admitting your own mistakes. Because I personally
100%
hate to work with people who never admit their mistakes, who always either pretend that they were right or just ignore the fact that they failed immediately on their face. For me, it means that people cannot grow. And if you have a manager like this, most likely this manager won't help you to grow. So to everything that Andrei and David just said, I think that's something that completes the list, at least for me.
I think you're right. It's how we recover and adapt and apply lessons we learn after failure. I think when we do that publicly, visibly, sincerely as leaders, that's hugely impactful, I think. And letting people know that they can fail as well. They can trust you with bad news because you're human like them, and you're gonna, oh crap, I messed up. This is what I'll do to fix it. And if you're sincere, I think that helps.
Yeah, I think another thing is when they fail, that you're there for them, whether it's backing them up or say that they're not in the office or they're not online or something, and something needs to get done today. Like the fact that you can get your hands dirty and kind of fall in for them and to kind of like back them up will, if you're not there, they won't be feeling as protected, which brings another topic about balancing the how much is overprotecting versus allowing them to grow. But I think that's another way to build trust, is that they know they can trust on you, they can rely on you if something goes wrong, for you to tell them, for you to fall in, for you to fill in for them, or to push them, challenge them, especially when they come in with assumptions. If you're just rolling over, yep, all right, we'll do it your way, but you know that that's wrong, that undermines, because later you won't go as well as it could.
Yeah, there's this accountability aspect, the mutual accountability. We'll lift you up, we'll support you, but we're not going to carry you. You're going to have to stand on your own, as well as, give us that accountability back.
That was, so to say, informative thing to share, to hear, and to share by you guys. Okay, we discussed the, so to say, the principles of leadership. We have discussed how to build the culture of trust, and that's important, and how not to undermine it. But besides that, some of you already mentioned it, considering the accountability, that what you need to do, that one of the roles of the leader is to get things done finally by the team, and you need to keep the team productive. So I want to ask the following question. What's important to track in people's day-to-day and more long-term process to see that the person will be productive and within a sprint, within a month, within a quarter, within a year? So what are you looking at in the work of developers, and what you want to notice in order to keep everyone within your team to stay productive?
I think you come into that question with an assumption, with the two things to keep in mind. Number one, I think building and maintaining momentum on an engineering team is one of the hardest things to do in engineering. We can solve a lot of problems. There's plenty of unsolved problems out there, but there's a lot of prior art on a lot of things we do day in and day out. But building and maintaining that momentum as a team and as an individual, I think, is one of the hardest things we can do. Number one. Number two, I think for an engineering team to be successful, you have to embrace compound interest versus winning the lottery, right? So there's the quote, everybody wants to play like a champion, but nobody wants to practice like one. So when we talk about how do we level up an engineer from a mid-level to a senior, or how do we get a team to kind of come together and ship and whatnot, it starts in talking about your daily habits. How do we build a methodical, incremental, almost relentless habit of work that's sustainable and healthy and satisfying over time? So are you showing up at the same time, in the same routine in how you do your work? Are you making space for work? Are you getting pulled into meetings and things everywhere? Are you supporting your teammates with quick code reviews? Are you supporting your teammates with small pull requests that are easily reviewable? Are you writing quality things? Are you going off on your own and working on things by yourself? One of the phrases I use that some people don't really like when I use it, I say, it's okay if we do less as long as we do it together. How well are you working with others? I would rather our team ship 5 small things, one thing a day for a week, than one big thing at the end of the week. So the metrics I'm looking at are, depending on your level and your role, how often are you writing code and committing it? What do your pull requests look like? How long does it take you to get back to people on pull request reviews? Where are all the other things you do that are not code? Where are those being tracked? Are you writing spec documents? Are you reviewing specs? Are you talking to product? Are you active in Slack? I think some of that can be measured objectively. Some of that just needs to be observed directly. So you have to be involved, and you have to be a participant in the process, and not just come snipe in, once a week and look at some numbers. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot of good metrics other than be involved, be there, and make sure you know what people's routines look like, and that you're promoting that granular, methodical, incremental progress every day.
Yeah, that's fantastic, David. Some of my most favorite metrics are the ones that change behavior for the better. And a couple of years ago, I remember reading an article, I think it was on a list apart by Derek Pausek, and he was talking about the wisdom of crowds and how every time you put a score on the page, it will change behavior. And I think he mentioned the example of Slashdot. Whenever you had the score of the comments, it would change the behavior, how users interacted with comments. Same thing happens with engineers and metrics. If you highlight certain metrics, they'll start focusing on that. And one of the examples I've had is exactly for what you were mentioning about the pull requests, or in our world, the merge requests, in how the throughput for each engineer per month, right? And then you track that and see the trend. And if we track the units of work that you're delivering, you can think about, oh, but that's easily gameable. I can totally start pushing out smaller merge requests and get my number up. That's the point. If you're motivated to drive smaller merge requests, they're more easily reviewable. And then if you start splitting them too hard, the reviewers will give you that feedback. No, this is too small. Why don't you just gather these 3 up? So I feel like those are the metrics that you should find in your work and in your companies, in your culture, that will drive. Because for us, iteration that you were talking, David, about the small increments is super key. It's one of our values. So the way that we focus on this metric, and then it in itself drives more focus on iteration, is one of our most successful metrics that we've looked at. But then again, it's also how you translate that to the human element, that if somebody had a rough milestone, somebody had a rough period, or they took too many PTO, you have to find ways to mitigate that impact on the metric and make sure that they understand that we're not just blindly following the data. We're not data-led, we're data-informed, right? We get the data, but then we imbue it with the human aspect of it. Whenever somebody's dealing with a burnout, I'm not going to assess the same way the metrics that person is dealing with. We're finding other metrics to focus on to get them back on the horse and getting them back in shape. And I think if you do that, then they will feel much more fairly evaluated than if you just like blindly saying you need to hit this number regardless. So yeah, the ones that change behavior is the ones that I really love.
My worry about those daily metrics on an individual level, I think I agree with what you're saying. Find the ones that change the behavior to where we want it to go. My worry though is sometimes we'll confuse activity for progress. And at the end of the day, it's what the team ships and delivers that is the goal, not what one person does. Don't like everything, there's a balance, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I think not only one metric will ever do. We have to have many and cross them and see how they translate, for sure.
I think the metrics aspect is something that has been heavily discussed, especially in the recent year, with everyone going remote. Like, I mean, it's like GitLab, I believe, was always remote. Not about Webflow, we always been remote. And like every engineering manager, especially manager working close with the business, like CTO, VP of engineering, director, like business asks them, hey, like every our department in our company has a set of KPIs, so you have to have two. And obviously people create this KPI. But the question is, does this KPI reflect two things? Does it reflect what's going on with the team? And does it reflect how we engineers help the company to grow? And like there are a lot of metrics that exist on the market. There is a DORA set of metric measured every year by Google, I believe. Like there are a lot of tools that measure productivity based on what's going on inside the code repository and so on and so forth. And over time, I personally came up to a set of metrics that indicate how we as engineers impact business. So sorry, like can we help our warehouse to ship product faster? Actually, do we do this or not? Do we help our customer support resolve their tickets faster? Do we help our marketing team to send their marketing campaigns effectively, and so on and so forth? And yes, we have other KPIs, but for us, it's like the dashboard in your car. It tells you how fast do you move, and it tells you what's your speed right now after you stop to drive around some bump. It doesn't it does relatively nothing for you to get to a certain point. You can make some calculation, but since you don't know what's the road behind you, in front of you, you don't know when exactly you'll get there. There might be some traffic, there might be some road issues, and so on and so forth. It just tells you how fast you're moving, and that's it in the current sector. So for me, having this metrics that connect business and engineering are important. And there is another thing that I learned about recently, and this is something that I will measure next year, is it's a metric called team happiness. It actually tells you how your team is feeling, because if you have a motivated team and a team of adults who actually know why they're doing what they're doing, then you have a productive team.
Yeah, you need magnitude and direction. You can't just have the scalar value of, did we do this much? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're coming to the end. Actually, the time has passed too fast, but still, the last thing that I want to discuss during the call and hear your opinions. The last thing that I want to discuss with you is currently there is a kind of the problem that we observing is that there are a lack of talent on the market. It's not too much developers. The demand for developers is growing and growing. And the role of previously the engineer leaders, if you need to, for example, to scale the team or you need to improve the productivity of the team, you have two options: to hire developers or to grow developers. And as the demand for developers is growing and growing, it becomes more harder to hire developers and more desirable to invest in the growth of developers. What do you think about this? Are there any I don't know, the problem that I actually shared that you experience in it right now? And what do you think about investing in growth of the developers within the companies? Is it the responsibility of engineer leader, or it's the responsibility of the developer himself to invest in his growth? Please share if you have opinion on that.
Let me start on this, because this is like one of my biggest pain points in the last year. So when with all the recent events, as a demand for engineers spiked up, and what actually happened in the region where we hire, in Russia and this region in general, a lot of traditional offline companies, like big enterprises, said, okay, everyone is doing this thing called digital. How they do this? They hire a lot of engineers. So let's hire a couple of thousand engineers, and then we also will become a digital company. And that obviously created a scarce for good talents. And one answer to this is yes, like we need to invest in teaching people. We need to invest in retaining people inside our companies, but it also requires us to rethink what do we do as a company. Because for me, not just engineering, but as a company in general. Because for me, this is one of the constraints which is a healthy constraint. It requires you to think differently. It almost brings you to the state of a startup that has a lot of, that has shortage on money, has shortage on other resources. So you think differently, you solve problems differently, and there are many solutions to that. You will most likely you'll focus on less things, but you will do them better. Like you'll focus on the most important legacy pieces of your software. You'll think twice before coding something. Maybe you'll go and use some existing solution. You will think more on retaining people, on motivating them, on making sure that people enjoy staying in your company, they can grow in your company. So I think this is, like, for me, it has more benefits than problems that it creates.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I mean, I heard a phrase a while ago, the value we bring to an organization is what we learn and apply as we grow into our next role. It's not what we do and ship as we sit and stay in the same place the whole time. If you want to go from a mid-level engineer to a senior engineer, you need to learn how to make people better, in addition to doing a few other things. And that only comes if you have opportunities to mentor people and help grow people. As a company, I want to get to a place where we can hire junior developers easily and not worry about, are we going to be able to support them? If we can do that, then we don't have the organizational or the technical debt that holds us back. We're going to ship simpler solutions faster, of higher quality. So yeah, I mean, I think it makes a ton of sense to optimize to where you can hire junior engineers. If the immediate problem right now, though, is we have to unwrangle a whole bunch of tech debt, you might need to hire a couple senior engineers to help you do that, but you have to be committed to it because the outcome is worth it. But yeah, I'm not going to disagree with anything you said, Andre. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I do think that engineering leaders do have a role to play here, whether it's through, I think there's more and more solutions for coaching or mentoring people that you don't even know, whether there are services that allow you to be approached by these people that are just coming out of college or just starting off in the industry. Well, I personally have taught at a Faculty of Fine Arts here in Lisbon for a course of designers, teaching them how to code, and they eventually, some of them ended up getting roles as front-end engineers in companies. And I think that part of giving back to the community, we do have a role to play, and some of them might take shape in going out and teaching classes. Others might be preparing courses online. One of my students is doing courses on accessibility for front-end. So it's about giving back and teaching people. And there's one thing that a lot of engineers fall prey of, the imposter syndrome. And a lot of the times we look at, oh, these things that I know, they're just so basic. Why would I spend time teaching this to anyone else? But I always go back to this quote from Adam J. Kurtz. He says that everything you've already accomplished is a mountain someone else is currently trying to climb. Maybe you can give them a leg up. And I think I love that quote. I've
That's wonderful.
Said that many times, because like the basic of CSS for us might be just basic, but somebody's trying to figure out how a selector works. If you take the time to write an article about it, you will help them. And I've had plenty of Christopher Murphy. He said he talked about remote mentors. There's a lot of people in the industry that have mentored me and have never heard my name, because I've read their articles, I've read their blogs. So in that sense, I think we do have a role to play in forming this new talent, but also about opening up our companies. Like David, you're trying to open up your company for juniors. We've had successful internships last year with junior engineers that eventually, after they finished their internship, they got offered jobs at GitLab. So it is possible, but it does require the companies to be responsible about how to onboard them and how to support them for success. And again, onboarding plays a huge part. Looking for soft skills more than hard skills. If somebody's not ticking all the boxes, maybe they're teachable. They have shown by their track record that they can easily learn things, and a lot of them are self-learners. So that's a great plus. So instead of looking at those particular hard skills, is this person super great and super experienced in testing? You can look about, have they shown through their track record that they can learn these things easily? And then I think we all have that thing in our minds, at least, which helps the industry. So
that was a nice finish, I guess, from Andre. He just summed up, so to say, the long-term aspiration for the community.